everyone. For this Animation Friday, I am going to be discussing the Fleischer cartoons, or in particular, the Fleicher Studios. Excuse me. And before I get to discussing this topic, I just wanted to mention that I am sorry if the last video that I posted, which was yesterday, did not go through. I was having issues with uploading it, but when I looked on my account today, it was uploaded, but I wasn't able to transfer it onto the That Guy with the Glasses website, but now it should be up, so that's all good. But without further ado now, let me discuss Fleischer Studios and the Fleischer's cartoons. Basically, Max and Dave Fleischer were brothers who eventually founded the Fleischer Studios with Paramount Pictures as their distributor, because again, this is the earlier stages of animation when you sort of needed a distributor in order for your animation to be showcased. So, basically they developed their studio in 1921. And they were big competitors with Disney at the time. I would say probably their biggest competitor when it comes to 1930s or later 1920s cartoons. So they did start off pretty much in the silent era, and then they eventually transferred to sound fairly easily. So that was something that that was significant, because it was rather difficult for a lot of the animators to change from silent to talking, but they seemed to do it with a lot of ease. And Max eventually invented the rotoscope, which allowed for animation to present itself in a sort of higher quality. And their first characters were Coco the Clown and Fitz the Dog, who eventually evolved into Bimbo. And they were pretty much the kings of their day, in particular between the 1920s and 30s. They really knew how to take their animation and create a unique style that was rather distinct from their competitors, Disney. So it really worked to their advantage. And eventually Bimbo, the character that they created, was upstaged by his girlfriend, Betty Boop. And again, she sort of did start out as sort of a dog-like character, and then she ended up being transformed into a more humanized character. And they also knew how to incorporate culture within their cartoons, in particular by having jazz musicians like Cab Calloway, Louis Armstrong, and Don Reedman be in their cartoon shorts, or part of their cartoon shorts. So they really used jazz as their as one of their means to sort of reach their audience, and it ultimately paid off significantly. Unfortunately, they suffered some challenge with the Hays Code. Now, the Hays Code was implemented in Hollywood in order to unsexualize, I guess, certain cartoons and certain films. And this affected Betty Boop in particular, because she was a fairly sexualized character, and they, as a result, had to make her a little bit more modest. And this kind of made it difficult because people were so used to her character as being wearing short shorts and or short skirts and things like that. And to have her character have this sort of transition, I think created sort of a lot of confusion, I think, especially during the time. So that was something, though, that they had to sort of adjust to. And also, within the 1930s, we see their creation of Popeye, which ended up being their most successful and famous series of cartoons, because this was when they were at sort of that height of popularity, and Popeye really reinforced that, and that was very, very significant for them. However, eventually they had to move to Florida because they wanted to take advantage of the tax breaks there, as well as the sort of breakup of unions. There was a lot of striking going on within Hollywood. So yes, that kind of resulted in them deciding that we should just go to another state where the laws are a little bit more lenient. And as a result, they ended up actually making animated films. Now, these animated films weren't necessarily as successful or as of the highest quality compared to something like Snow White, but regardless, they made two of them that were most noted. One called Gulliver's Travels and Mr. Bug Goes to Town. And they also developed later on a series of Superman cartoons, and that was, I believe, more towards the 1940s. And they ultimately expanded the staff in Florida, but this created a severely high overhead and resulted in them having a lot of financial difficulties. And I guess it's just how they structured their whole, I guess, organization is what ultimately resulted in a huge detriment to them financially. And they ultimately had to ask Paramount, their distributor, for loans, and eventually, since they weren't really able to keep the studio running on their own, they basically had to end up selling it to Paramount. And this, I think, created a huge detriment to Max and Dave Fleischer's relationship. Pretty much after that, they really weren't, I guess, in much contact. They did go on to do sort of their separate things that, again, involved animation, but they just worked for various different studios. So eventually, that's kind of how their story sort of comes to an end when it comes to their cartoons and their legacy. So I would say that once the 1940s came around, was really when they started to sort of, I guess, lose the ground that they had within the 1930s. So I think that's ultimately what ended up happening, and they didn't have a strong foundation financially to continue, and so hence we do not have these cartoons anymore. But they do have a huge impact on filmmaking in particular, especially when it comes to branding. We see Betty Boop pretty much everywhere. We see Popeye sometimes too, and we still remember the Fleischer cartoons, I think. I think they hold a huge significance to our culture, in particular within the United States, especially with the incorporation of jazz. And I think that they deserve a place in the history books when it comes to animation, because they really tried to provide innovation with their cartoons and really tried to make their cartoons unique and stand out. So I think, though, ultimately that's really all I can say about the Fleischer Studios and their cartoons, basically. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. This was a fan request, and I thought it was definitely interesting to look into. But really, in a nutshell, that's really their whole history and how they ended up being able to sort of rise to the top. So, I think, though, that's really all I can say about this subject in particular. I think I will try to do more of these kinds of videos where I discuss sort of the history relating to them. Maybe in particular more smaller studios, because I know there's been videos that have been done that have discussed DreamWorks and Disney's history. So I kind of wanted to address some studios that are kind of not really as looked into, but we'll see what we can do with that. And finally, before I go, I just wanted to say that I'm going to be gone next week. So that's why I'm making 3 videos today, and I won't be back until a week. So the next week will be no videos, and then the week after, though, I will eventually start making them again. I'm going to be on vacation, so I can't really make videos while I'm on vacation. So I just wanted to let everybody know that, and I'll put an announcement in the description, and I'll mention it in the next 2 videos. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody,